Hello and welcome back. Today I'm joined by Nell Smircina, and we're digging into a conversation about the bigger picture of our profession, why advocacy matters, and how we as individual practitioners can contribute to the growth and future of acupuncture in ways that align with our strengths. We talk about what it really looks like to get involved with your state or national association, and I'm happy to say that Nell reported it is not all about policy writing. There are so many roles that need filling, and she discusses how pretty much whatever skills you have can make a big impact for your state association. We also dive into the topic of acupuncture practices as potential investment opportunities. So in short, there are investors out there looking to buy acupuncture practices. They often keep the practitioner in place, and their goal is to streamline operations and increase revenue, and Nell happens to be one of them. So she shares what she and other investors are typically looking for, the red and the green flags that they pay attention to, and why, even if you're not thinking about selling, it can be incredibly valuable to run your practice in a way that would be appealing to a buyer. So we cover everything from evaluating your numbers more regularly to creative exit strategies for your business, and basically a fresh new approach to entrepreneurship in our field. I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Nell. This episode is sponsored by Acupuncture Marketing School, the step-by-step training to help you get more patients, build a thriving practice, and finally feel confident about your marketing. Acupuncture Marketing School is currently $200 off through Thursday, April 17th. There are two options depending on your learning style. I'll be teaching the live version over 6 weeks on Zoom, which includes real-time instruction, feedback, and a small group of classmates for accountability and motivation. That starts Friday, April 18th. Or if you prefer to go at your own pace, the self-paced version includes the same content in pre-recorded video format with worksheets, and that is also on sale this week. Both versions include the same material and guide you step by step on how to create strong, effective marketing for your practice. First, we walk through setting up the foundation of your marketing that really makes everything else you do more effective and efficient. So you get more of the patients that you love to treat for less effort. And then we walk through the visibility piece of your marketing, how to build awareness in your community about your practice, and letting people know how you can help them. Both sides of this equation are really important in marketing, and there are not a lot of programs out there that cover both. Plus, Acupuncture Marketing School is trusted by over 550 alumni and backed by more than 50 five-star reviews. I would absolutely love for you to join me. The live version on Zoom is going to be a fantastic opportunity to connect, and I can't wait to help you with your marketing. The links are in the show notes to check out both the live and the self-paced versions. And of course, please always feel free to email me any questions that you have at michelle@michellegrassick.com. I'm always very happy to chat with you. All right, let's get into this episode with Nell. Hi, Nell. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Michelle.
Thank you so much for coming back. I just looked it up, and your first episode was number 49, so I cannot wait to catch up on all of the fascinating things that you are doing in our industry. I feel like you've been a practitioner, you've been a clinician in schools, right?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you got your MBA in the time frame since we last spoke.
Since we last spoke, yeah.
You have been advocating for our profession, which we just discussed is mostly volunteer. Mm-hmm. Why don't you introduce yourself and bring us up to speed?
Yeah, no, so great to be back here. It's like you've done incredible things in a very short period of time. I feel like it wasn't long since we last spoke, but I guess, yes, there's been a lot going on for both of us. So yeah, I'm Dr. Nell Smircina. I originally had my practice in Beverly Hills, California, focusing on post-surgical care. Had some other providers kind of scaled it to multi-specialty. During COVID, did a lot of men's health and concierge medicine. Everything was kind of shutting down and we were like, how do we stay connected to people and make sure that they feel safe? And so we were doing a lot of in-home care, which works well for post-surgical patients already. Been really involved in education. So while I was doing my doctorate at Emperor's, ran their teaching clinic as clinic manager, which was an incredible deep dive into high volume management, integrative healthcare. How do we make all these things talk to each other? On a really tight budget in education and with like a lot of regulation, healthcare and education. Also have done a lot of consulting in the herbal medicine industry, speaking at different conferences, and I really fell in love with the business of our medicine. And I think that can be a little bit controversial in our field, as you know. But I think if we're not set up for success, fewer people come to see us, fewer people know the efficacy of what we can do, fewer healthcare providers understand how we can work really collaboratively together and get the best results for patients. And so I've also been really focused on advocacy. I was the president of CSOMA in California and then the vice chair of public policy for the ASA. So have kind of seen all across the board what our industry is doing and capable of. And you know, we can dig into this a little bit, but definitely suffered some burnout with that, with being involved with all the things, especially with advocacy, which, you know, for our industry is really completely volunteer and not a ton of involvement. But it's been a really incredible journey. And when I realized how much I loved helping other practitioners, I felt like there was a gap in my knowledge and went and got my MBA, completed that almost a year ago. So it has been a while since we talked. And now I'm really trying to just like next level up, find a place for acupuncturists in larger integrative healthcare. So I've actually been kind of on the investment side, looking at integrative practices to acquire and then help them get to their next level of growth. So a lot of full circle moments in there for you and I together and everything that's been going on since we last spoke.
Amazing. I feel like that's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to do in I'm not even sure, a year and a half time span.
Yeah.
Are you tired?
I have a 3-year-old, so...
Oh yeah, you're tired.
I could cut half of those things and I would still be tired.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's start with the advocacy and the burnout piece because, you know, before we got on the call, you had brought up how it's all volunteers and there are not structures really set up to get people to participate long term, and that's a real problem on a bigger scale. We often think about it like individually, right? Like, do I want to participate? Do I have time for this? But there's a much bigger picture that's happening nationally, it sounds like.
Yeah, and you know, it's challenging because just to find the ideal setup for something like that is hard, you know, like building this industry from the ground up and building a lot of grassroots movements from the ground up. And we're really a bunch of people who don't like to color in the lines. So to then get on board for, you know, things like policy or, you know, what we should be called as a profession, a lot of times it ends up being a ton of energy internally just for us to try to move forward into the larger healthcare delivery system. I miss day-to-day advocacy so much. I, you know, would love being on Capitol Hill or being in board meetings and figuring out like what's the next initiative. But that became for me something that I loved so much that I was really spending even more time on than practice. The whole reason that, you know, I initially got into this medicine. And you know, it's unfortunate because like the people that I've worked with, whether CSOMA, the other state associations, the ASA, even the Council of Colleges, like these are all incredibly well-intentioned people, like some of the best people that I've ever met who just want to do good in their heart of hearts. And of course you're going to suffer burnout from that at some point. You know, everybody's doing a full-time job as well as the advocacy work. And, you know, you could be heavily involved in your state association and then all right, I'm going to get involved nationally in addition or instead of, and there's just an unlimited amount of work to be done. And other healthcare professions have really professionalized that process where they have paid executive directors and there's really more of a funnel system starting at the student level that, hey, you're going to be involved in your advocacy work in your profession. And there's just a lot of dots that still need to be connected when it comes to our industry. Like we have the really good people to do it. It's just that oh my gosh, like people can only do so much, especially when they have to do all of the other things to provide for their families and their patients as well.
Do you feel like there is a path for us to have that more professional structure where people might actually be paid to do that work?
Yeah, I think, everybody has a hand in it, from the different organizations to the schools. I think the challenge is really it's financial in nature. When we look at how big, like how many practitioners we have, how much money practitioners are making, a lot of times people are making really difficult decisions. Am I going to spend the money to join my state association, or am I going to put that towards X, Y, and Z in my practice, or, food on the table? And so I think there's a lot of pieces to that. I think it's also a mindset shift where you do feel like, just like you buy, you have to get your business license. I'm going to get my malpractice insurance. I'm going to make sure I have my supplies for my patients. I am going to be a member of my state association that then is a member of the national association, because again, physical therapists, they're, chiropractors, they're involved from the second they're students, they're joining those associations. And so you stay involved through that. You see a bigger picture. I think this is like the most positive thing from an individual level, to see a bigger picture outside of private practice, because it's so hard when you're stressed and you're worried and you're trying to build and get more patients in the door, to know that there are other people going through the same thing that you are, who care about the big picture for our profession, and that we get to be a part of something that's bigger than us. That's like the holistic mindset that I feel like I wish we would apply how we look at whole person health to our industry as well.
That's such a nice way to look at it. So I guess I would imagine people are wondering, like, what is the first step if they want to participate? I mean, so signing up for their state association would probably
Which
be
is
the
very
first step.
affordable as a student. A lot of state associations are free for students, or they're like $30 a year for students. It's a couple Starbucks.
Yeah. And what would you recommend after that? Like, so if people feel motivated but have like absolutely no idea how to participate, like what comes after
I
joining
would
their state
contact
association?
the leadership of their state association, because a lot of times, it's like I've sat on that board, I've done that job. Like, we're like, okay, we have all these members, but we have like 10 people who are really sitting here doing all the day-to-day work. Like, there's a need for committees, there's a need for research, there's all these different initiatives that are going on. There's a need for PR. Like, if you're like, hey, I really like social media, I got very into it from Michelle Grassick's class. So now maybe I could help my state association. Like, I'd love to volunteer. Because even within the different states, there's different levels of volunteers available, different levels of expertise. And so it doesn't have to be, I think people sometimes think, oh, I need to be like a seasoned practitioner and been in the industry for 15 years before I could serve on a board or serve on a committee. No, like, all your skills are needed. It's not just how long have you been in the industry and who do you know and what policy could you write. No, it's like, what are your skills that you'd be willing to contribute? And sometimes that's as easy as just having a conversation and being like, hey, what do you guys need? And that also, like, I learned a lot. It wasn't just it's a lot of giving, but I learned so much from those experiences. And so that's important too. Like, that's something that we also don't do a lot of collaborative, masterminding or like things that other professions do. And I got that from those experiences, like having a group of people who you could come together with and like still talk about your practice or whatever was going on. It wasn't just about the task at hand. It was about that community.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people that I have spoken to, at least, and myself, feel like you have to know how to read or write policy to participate, right? Like, you have to know how to participate in the government, like a government structure kind of thing. And that's a little intimidating, right? You're like, oh God, how do I contribute to that?
It's very intimidating, especially because you will hear about like different policy initiatives that come up, and then you're like, oh, like I could never do that. First of all, there's training for that if the association is going in that direction. There's a lot of direction given with that, down to like scripts and letter writing, all of that if you want to be really involved. But we never wrote policy. Like we had
Thank
a
God.
policy, like when I was with CSOMA, we had a lobbyist. And so that was part of like what we need. We needed more members so we could afford to have a lobbyist who was going to be able to structure that properly and put it through the appropriate channels. And that's the same thing, ASA working very collaboratively with NCCOM, like leveraging resources in that way because they do have a lobbyist. We all want to see the profession move forward. So no, like you're not at all expected to do those things. I've had people put together like slide decks, had people do research on certain areas or, put out like share things on social media, help like rewrite a document. There's so many different things. Continuing education, a lot of the state associations will do continuing education. They need people who do continuing ed, like speakers for that, or to help with that, spread the word about it. So there's a lot, like really a lot that can be done, and you don't have to be an expert or in the field for however many years in order to be helpful or successful or learn.
And so I feel one important piece of this is how, like you sign up for your state association, that money goes so that you can get a lobbyist. And then now we're talking national level, right? So this is about like how our profession is represented broadly and whether we can sort of be integrated into other structures at the national level, right? And so suddenly it becomes like, is acupuncture going to be like in hospitals or covered by insurance or many different directions that could go in. But I don't know, I always feel like the big picture really helps me to remember why I'm doing something and why it's worth the energy.
Yeah.
And the money.
And you have and you have state specific issues, like certain states need certain things that other states don't need. Some states don't have a practice act yet. And so they're trying to like get together and figure out how to do that. But then, at the national level, like if you're trying to get legislation through, they're like, how many members do you represent? Well, you need to count all the state members who are then part of AS. Like that critical mass is really important. You can't be just a single person like putting a bill through and being like, no, acupuncturists really care about this. So I think like that's even the bigger piece too, where you're like, hey, if there's, 38,000 acupuncturists, like, do you represent all of them? Like that's the question. And so I think that's why I'm a big fan of people just joining their state association if they're unsure, like, okay, I don't know if I have the bandwidth for this. Well, join, be part of that critical mass. You'll get updates. You'll know what's going on. Something might come through the pipeline that you're like, hey, this is interesting to me. And so I think like even just that, like that active measure that is like pretty passive, like then just like getting information and being involved. And most of these states have benefits too. So you get like discounts for vendors, you get, discounts on continuing ed, like that type of thing. The memberships usually pay for themselves. And then you get to be part of the solution of having that critical mass that's needed for us to be part of a larger conversation.
I had another question for you, but it's gone. That's okay. I'll clip this section out.
There's plenty to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really helpful. I'll be honest, I don't think about the advocacy on a day-to-day basis. It is something that sort of comes and goes in my inbox, basically, right? As you said, being a member and getting the updates reminds me that, wow, important things are happening on a scale that's much larger than how much revenue did we make this month at my tiny clinic in a small town.
And sometimes there's different phases to that, right? Like it's like a time when like 30 hours of my week was dominated by advocacy work. And that was like not the case now. Like now I'm more like get the updates. Random people will reach out to me because of, other people I know in advocacy or ask advice about something. And like, I'm like happy to do all of that. But you go through phases in your life where, and in practice, in your career, you kind of just have to adjust not only your bandwidth, but like what can you best offer at this time? Like what do people really need? Like I feel like there's like really good leadership in place for a lot of these organizations. It did not have to be me, and it was affecting other aspects of my life. But I think when you look at like your skill set, and I think you do this really well because there is such a need for a different conversation around marketing and how we present ourselves and just like the mindset with that and feeling like there are these bite-sized pieces that can get us towards something where we feel like, oh, okay, I'm more comfortable with this. I get it. And so I think that shifts, like depending on where you're at in your career, where you're at in your life. And as you're not just adjusting, like we talked about, like adjusting your value proposition. It's not just like your value proposition for your practice, but I think it's more like introspective than that. Like, what place am I at in my life, and what can I best offer for the most impact right now? And that could look really different. It certainly looks different for me now than it did a year and a half ago when we first spoke.
Yeah, and helpful to remember that any sort of volunteering does not have to be forever.
Right. Yeah. You can always come back to it. The need will still be there.
Right.
Trust.
Take a break, recalibrate.
Yeah.
I'm so curious to talk about your MBA. Congrats on finishing that. Gosh, it's been a year, so congrats for you a while ago. You are just doing some fascinating things. Can you tell us how you're using that degree?
Yeah. And I would say, like, it's all just, part of that value proposition in life space, right? So I had taken a role at American Acupuncture Council, and which is like an incredible malpractice company. You know, Marilyn Allen was like always a mentor to me. And that kind of pulled me away from practice in the day-to-day. I had other practitioners who were doing a lot of the day-to-day. I'm like still doing virtual consults. I was going back and forth between Scottsdale and LA, but it really forced me to kind of just look at like, okay, I have a child now. My son was like really young at that point. I'm like, what do I want my life to look like? Like, where do I think my skill set best is? And I realized I missed working for myself, like absolutely. But I also really missed helping other people and businesses in this space grow, because I think it's a tough thing to break through, not only the mindset of I'm a healer, I'm a business person, like how do those things interact? But I was really good at that and really loving that. And I want to see more people in integrative healthcare in general be really successful, because I think anytime someone has an issue, like their first thought should not be, let me go to my orthopedic and get a cortisone injection, or like, let me go to my primary care and like pass this up. Like, it needs to be, how can I make my body work for me? And we're in a perfect position to do that as a profession. So I wanted to do something with the MBA that would kind of just fill knowledge gap for me, where I'm like, okay, I can still help other businesses. I can, and I was doing some consulting work with that, because I love herbal medicine businesses. I love helping other practices, like helping integrate practices. But I'm like, what's the next step of that? Because as much as I love the variety of bouncing contract to contract, I missed the like following something through that I had in private practice. And so I stumbled upon this idea of entrepreneurship through acquisition, which is apparently a concept that's like taught in very high level business schools. And I stumbled upon that when I probably had a semester left of my executive MBA. And I was like, well, this is cool. So you buy an operating business and then you run it as CEO. And so that's the ultimate like leadership, getting to help a business move forward. And there's a lot of different ways that people go about this, like taking out an SBA loan or finding investors that back them. I ended up applying for what's called an accelerator program, where they kind of build in resources around this search for a business. You create a thesis. So for me, it's like integrative health businesses. We have certain investment criteria for like how big those are. So that could be multi-specialty practices. It could be, you know, a chiro office that's, you know, kind of skilled into medical aesthetics. Really a lot of flexibility there, but I knew I wanted to stay in my lane of how do I help integrative healthcare, dietary supplements, herbal medicine, like everything was kind of included in that potential, and teamed up with this accelerator. They provide a lot of resources and investors who back that search for business for a couple years. And so I'm like 7 months into that, had found a business that I thought I was going to acquire. And that's, even that learning experience has taught me a lot about like what I was not doing optimally in practice. If I wanted to think about long-term, kind of like how we're not set up to think in such a way where there's something we can do other than make a job out of our practice. So it's been a really interesting time where I'm excited to find that ideal business that I'm going to stay with for a few years and help grow. But it's just also made me very reflective of my experience in practice, like other businesses that I've worked with. And yeah, so it's been fascinating and a huge learning curve.
Wow. So, okay, you would be purchasing a business and you'd be working with them with the goal of maybe helping them scale or improve revenue, reduce costs, that kind of thing. And would you sell it at that point? Like in a
So
couple of
I
years?
could, in a couple of years, the investors would want to, like in a 5 to 7 year time frame, like move on to other opportunities once certain growth metrics are met. But like as CEO, I could stay on, I could keep my equity, I could put more money into the business, I could find additional investors. So also gives me a lot of flexibility where you're thinking like, I don't know if I can handle thinking about 10 years from now. You're like, hey, I can handle thinking about 2 years and then 5 years. And then, so that's also, again, like a good growth opportunity for me to have to go through that. But yeah, I like the flexibility of that where I'm like, if I can see additional opportunity with the company or longevity with the company or additional ways to grow it, I don't have to be done. I'm not like married to the investor group of people. I'm really here for the company.
And so I would imagine you could do this repeatedly, right? Five
Yeah,
to seven
people
years,
do.
and then another one, 5 to 7 years, kind of over and over. Wow.
Or you're adding additional one, like you buy one and make that your baby, and then you're having other kids along the way and bringing them into the fold.
Yeah. Wow. So this is a way that I have never thought about business in this way before. And a couple of months ago, I got an email which I thought was maybe spam. It seemed like nuanced for spam, but this person messaged me and was like, "Hey, I help business owners buy and sell practices, and I have someone who's looking to buy an acupuncture practice like yours in the area." And the reason I thought it was spam was because they were located like 2.5 hours away. And I mean, now I feel like they could be located almost anywhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
are they relocating?
I'm looking across the country.
Right, yes. And I mean, initially I was like, well, if this is real, I'm flattered. If it's not real, like, what do I have to lose? So I answered, I'm not interested in selling my practice, but I answered and said, I just wanted to let you know I'm located out here. Like, kind of like, is this real?
Right, like
and
testing the
they
waters.
never responded to me, so I was like, oh, okay, maybe it was spam, or maybe I was too far away. So I have no idea what they were looking for, if it was legit. But just this concept that it could be that there are really skilled business people out there who are looking to buy acupuncture practices. It kind of blows my mind and is really fascinating at the same time.
Yeah, there's actually 2 women that I consulted with who, when they found out I was looking at integrative healthcare and that I had the background I did in acupuncture, they reached out because they were like, our thesis is like, we want to buy a bunch of acupuncture practices nationally and then like basically help professionalize them so that, they're all on the same EHR, like they have the same brand, like all of that, and have the option to keep practitioners in place. So, that is like a big undertaking. Like we think about how personalized our medicine is and how people practice so differently. I think you would have to find the right people, like the right practices for that. But I guess like what was exciting for me to take from that is like what I've seen through this whole process, interacting with investors, like all of that. There's a lot more interest and appreciation of our industry than I think being on the inside of it, we understand.
Yeah.
When people see the growth rates for complementary and integrative health, they're like, wow, like that looks really appealing. That's a market we want to be part of. How do we get in there? And I think we're not always seeing that because we're so focused on our day-to-day, which, a lot of people are. I don't think that's unique to us. But I do want to really impress upon that. Like nobody looked at, and these are, actual like multinational investors, nobody looked at my thesis and was like, integrative health? Like, really? Like, I don't know. They're like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. You have a good background for this. Like, you have the credentials for it. So I love that. And I always try to share that when I'm talking to people in our industry because, I don't think we hear enough of that. We hear what we hear in school, like this is what you need to know clinically, like hope you can get some patients in the door and get good results. They keep coming back and maybe they'll refer people. But there's so much more to it than that. And it's really exciting to see at a high level, whether it's like NIH or like MD Anderson and Sloan Kettering, like programs are really seeing us and wanting the value that we can provide. So I feel like that for me has been such a positive thing in looking for a company in like the bigger picture and how do we fit in.
And so do you feel like because I'm assuming you must be looking at like dozens and dozens of potential businesses, are you noticing trends? Are you approaching people who have not even mentioned that they're interested in selling, or are these people like prepared to sell?
So yeah, it's a combination of both. There are brokered opportunities. So people who are like, I want to sell my business. I have a business broker. We already have some data in a file that shows what we have. We have a PowerPoint deck that shows about the business. They might have a price in mind already. Usually they do. But I'm also talking to a lot of people. They're called proprietary deals, where you basically outreach to people who may not have thought this was a possibility. And really a good candidate for that is like baby boomer generation, because it's like these like small, medium-sized businesses are like 50% of our economy. And these are people who need to retire, who need to be thinking about that. What I do like about my thesis is like it doesn't have to be someone at retirement age, especially if it's like a multi-specialty practice. But definitely with trends that I'm seeing is like when things become problematic and it's like this is not a good time to sell, and kind of what you can have in your head if this is something you want to think about maybe in the future is like, could your business run without you? And if it can't, like what's the path to getting there? So a big issue with anything healthcare related is like provider dependency or provider concentration. So if you have associates, but you're like people are still coming because, no, I want to see Michelle, or I heard about Michelle Grassick's practice, or, you know, like that's a little problematic. Like it's better when you can show, oh, okay, like Michelle's seeing 20% of patients, everybody else is seeing 20% of patients. Yes, of course, she has a big name and people love her and they do come to the practice. But at the end of the day, we have some other associates going. Or is your practice, like we're really conditioned to do this, like just build your practice around yourself? Or like, it's like, you know, Dr. Nell's Wellness.
Yeah.
So that's a little hard to sell. At the same time, I will say there's still a market for that if you can get enough practices together. Private equity really did that with dental. So like every dental practice is just somebody's name if it's like a solo practitioner, and they, you know, rolled them up and rebranded them. I think what makes us a little bit of a challenge for that is just how uniquely we practice.
Yeah.
And so I think if selling is something that's on the horizon, you want to do whatever you can to professionalize. And then of course, like we're in healthcare, so anything regulatory wise or risk wise that you can offset is really important. Do you actually use accounting software to like double check? Like even if you're a cash practice, are you documenting properly for your patient notes and coding things properly? Because that's a big misconception. And kind of what I like about having these things in your mind, it doesn't mean you have to sell, but you're going to end up running a much better practice along the way. Like you're going to be more compliant. You're going to plan better. You're going to be looking at your numbers more. You're going to be looking at your patient satisfaction. Like, are people coming back? Is there a mechanism for somebody to stay with you for a long time that feels really genuine? Like you have an active care portion, and then you have these like subsequent wellness visits or whatever you want to brand it for your practice. What's the lifetime of a customer look like? Those are really important things that have come up with like any type of provider dominated. Obviously for like supplements, or it's very different, but any practice, regardless of if it's like acupuncture, chiropractic, like MDs and multi-specialty, the provider concentration and like how dependent is this business on one person? Like what happens if something happens to them tomorrow in the middle of all this going on? That's the biggest thing.
So when you're talking about professionalizing your practice, it almost sounds like shifting branding away from emphasizing one person. maybe you could call it like a neutral brand name that someone else might want to purchase. Because, when I started my practice, I debated, like everyone else, should it be Grassic Acupuncture? It seems easy. There are maybe a dozen Grassics in the United States. Seems really unlikely that another is going to become an acupuncturist and also want to purchase my practice. And I think part of our thought process is, selling feels really far away, right? I can always change. But I think we're maybe underestimating how far in advance it is helpful to prepare a business for resale when we're ready to retire. So
the retirement piece is huge. Like, I don't think, even if someone's listening to this and they're like, I would never want to sell my business. Okay.
Right, and that's probably a lot of people. I still think,
that's a lot of people. I still think it's really beneficial to have a brand name that is not you. And that's because it's about the patient benefit. It's about what are they drawn to. I don't think as an industry we're like really egotistic, but we do things that kind of display us as that, which is very confusing to me. Because if a patient's looking, like, that's what every plastic surgeon does, like their name, plastic surgery.
Right.
That's really different than what we provide. Like, we provide such a comprehensive, like, hand-holding, coaching, health journey experience. However you navigate that with a patient, it's like a partnership. You're not the person who's just going to do all the magic and they're not going to do the work. Like, you have success with patients when they understand and they're bought into their health. And so it should be more about that value proposition for the patient and less about us. I'm not saying don't have a page with like you as the founder of your business and your credentials. Like, I do think that's important. Like, people want qualified providers. But like, in thinking, do I want to have a supplement line or an herbal line someday? Or, if I am, hiring somebody else, is that person not going to seem as credible because the name of the business is my name? Just thinking about those things that are completely dissociated from selling. It has nothing to do with that, but it really has to do with welcoming somebody into a space that feels sustainable, that feels like a community, that doesn't feel like one person dictates all. And so I think there's a benefit to that outside of, let me think about retirement. And then the retirement piece, just a note on that, I think we need to think about that. Yeah. We don't set ourselves up and have a self-employed 401k. Like, there are a lot of things we could be doing, again, completely aside from selling, that allow us to function in a sustainable, again, holistic way, where it's not just about the holistic nature of the treatment we give our patients, but how we conduct our lives, our finances, our planning, and our overall health and wellness.
Yeah, I feel like, gosh, most of the acupuncturists I talk to, and I work with a lot of new grads, right? So they haven't really thought about retirement yet. But I feel like most do not have that self-employed 401k. And if they're, if we could have the tiniest tangent and just say that if there's one thing that matters the most in your retirement, it is starting early. Because even if you only have a little bit of money to put in there, if you are going to work for 30 years, the money you put in at the beginning makes you so much more money than the money you put in a panic towards the end. So totally. Even if you can only put $40 a month, $30 a month into retirement, please do. please do.
It is something. And also, have people around you, whether it's like coaching with Michelle, like somebody who will tell you the things that are not going to be comfortable or natural for you on the front end. I am not good at saving money. Like, for me in practice, it was such a win when I'm like, great, I could put my business Amex on auto pay for all my business expenses and it gets paid every month and I don't have to worry because I know the balance in my bank account is bigger than what's going out. And I like spending money. Like, I continuously am making more money. Like, I like spending money and I like donating money. I want to have control and freedom over that. But for me, I'm like, I will never actually retire. That doesn't mean you don't want to have money there.
Right. Yeah.
And not just if something happens, but to not be forced to work at the level you are currently working at to survive. So my partner is all about that. And frankly, it drives me crazy sometimes because he is my life partner. He also, during COVID, left his job and then was running all the operations for my practice. So he got that locked in. Like, what are we doing here? And so you need to have those people around you who are going to push you to do the things that you can justify to yourself in the moment are not completely necessary. Because like right now, my son has like more in his 529 than I had when I was like at my height of practicing in my savings. Like, that's not okay. So, I mean, good for him. He's going to be in a great place. But you can't be good at everything. You need to have like a good amount of self-awareness, and have those people around you, not necessarily who are going to do it for you, but are going to push you a little bit to be like, hey, what about this? Let's have some accountability here.
Yeah, it really is about balance, and I would never say that all of us acupuncturists should also like be really good at finances and like know how to do these things or know anything about retirement funds until the moment that you decide like, hey, maybe I will get an advisor and ask them to explain these things to me. Sometimes I have to ask my retirement person to explain the same things to me almost every year that I visit him for a checkup, right? So you don't have to be an expert, but to have someone who is on your side, I think is really where that balance comes in. And yeah, I go up and down with the savings. I really freaking love saving money, and then I will.
Good for you,
then I'll have these months where I'm like, I've been so good. I've been saving forever. I'm gonna buy the things that I wasn't buying. And I'm like, so is it a wash?
Yeah.
But it's different for everyone.
Got to have balance in life.
Yes.
I think that's important. And, you know, like there's some things that you just draw a line with, and some I'm sorry, I need a line item for coffee. Like what that gives me to be able to not stress out about walking into a coffee shop and be like, did you really just spend $7 on a latte when you have an espresso at home? Like, I want to have that experience. Now, granted, there's like also a way you can get creative with that and strategic. I make sure when I have business meetings, it's at a coffee shop that I like because I like check my box. It's a meeting. I get to write it off. Yes. I get my little bit of joy. Can do that too.
I'm so curious, you know, when you are thinking about all of the businesses that you've been reviewing, are there any like mistakes that you would advise that we avoid, aside from the ones you kind of mentioned? I don't know if I would call them mistakes. Like, it's not a mistake to name your practice after yourself, certainly not. But like, definitely not. In terms of,
I started that way, by the way. Like, I think we all like.
Yes, yeah, actually, I think most people do start that way. Nothing wrong with that at all. But if people are thinking about selling, like, what are you looking for? What are the things that turn you off as an investor? And we could also keep in mind that I think most of us are probably not going to sell to an investor. Maybe, you never know. But we could think about, you know, if another solo practitioner is going to pop up and want to take over my practice when I leave and I want to sell it to them, like, how might I want to approach that? Like, do's and don'ts.
Yeah. So I would say from an investment standpoint, like the ones I mentioned are probably the key ones. What I like about that is it also just helps you run a better business. Mm-hmm. But I would say like the biggest, I don't know, like thing that people don't do is think about those other options. Like, oh, I would never want to sell to like, you know, private equity or an investor or some other group. Well, but would you want to be able to have someone continue the legacy of your business that maybe has trained under you, that is like at a different age than you, that you feel comfortable with it? Like, would you want that as an option? Would you want an option where you could stop working 5 days a week and you could work 2 days a week and have other people come in? You know, I think also when we think about like selling or even selling to, let's say, an associate of yours, there's an idea that they need to come up with this like lump sum. There are so many different ways you could structure that too. Like, they could be paying you like over a period of time to make it more feasible for them and to make it fair and rewarding for you as well. So I think not thinking anything is a no-go, just being really open is the biggest thing. And then also just like meeting as many people as possible with different skill sets than you and being really invested in yourself and your own. I think sometimes we get afraid to try something different because we're like, oh my gosh, like that's going to be a lot of money, or like, what if it doesn't work out? I think if you have the mindset that you will absolutely learn from X, you can work through those decisions a little bit quicker. So I had a business coach who was like, when you're deciding, it's like best case scenario, worst case scenario, decide. And that for me is like a Capricorn who likes to do everything right and the hard way, and how everybody tells me I can't do it was a little bit of a mind shift. Like I like my pros and cons column. That has been the biggest game changer for me, just being comfortable that, oh, I have some expertise at this point. I can make faster decisions, and I also am mature enough and strong enough to handle consequences of those like positive or learning experience. So yeah, it always comes back to mindset, whatever question.
I like that you called it learning experiences.
Yeah.
It's not negative, positive and learning experientions.
That you get to choose how you look at that. Like, I'm not saying they were all fun times. I also am like, have kind of an aversion to this idea that the ultimate goal is happiness. I'm gonna get like a little esoteric for a second. I think like what people should be striving for is like what actually feels the best to them. I think for me, like I have a lot of moments of happiness. I love being happy. I'm more concerned with fulfillment or impact. That's so much more sustainable to me. And a lot of times when you're striving for impact or fulfillment, it's uncomfortable. You do not feel happy every single day. So yeah, I encourage people to really feel empowered to choose how they look at something or the result of something.
Yeah. And I love the idea that as acupuncturists, we are free to think much bigger than maybe we were initially taught in acupuncture school. This is something that we talk about occasionally, just the idea that, you know, if you have a great idea, even if it isn't the path that you thought you would take in undergrad or grad school, it doesn't mean that it can't be done or that it won't be great.
Right.
Yeah,
and maybe it's a timing thing. Like, I have my idea, I have one idea on this back burner that has been there for years, and it's going to be probably another 5 to 7 years. But, like, it's there, and people should nurture those ideas and, again, leverage people around you, ask for introductions to people. Do you know anybody who knows anything about this? Because even if it's just putting some energy and bandwidth towards that idea, that could be possible.
Yeah. Well, I have other questions, but we're at the end of time.
So we're at the end of time.
We
knew that would happen.
Yes. I do have one last question for you, which I'm sure that the definition can have changed for you. So what is your definition of success?
You know, I purposefully didn't listen to my podcast the last time because it was like, oh, she's going to ask this again.
Yeah. It's
quite possibly the same one. But just definition of success is when your vision for your life matches the reality of it. And I think, yes, that sounds very simple, but what I like about it is that it just looks so different for everybody. Like some people, like for them, like success would be like feeling happy all the time. And so I think when you're like, hey, this is what I want to see for my life. And I think that's also completely separate from finances, like what, like, you know, things get integrated in different ways for different people, and different levels of importance and values come into play. So I think it's when your vision is meshing with the reality.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thanks for having me again. This was fun. This was a great way to catch up.
Yes. Yeah. After recording, I realized I forgot to ask Nell how you can connect with her, how you can get in touch with her, so I will share that with you now. You can visit her website at drnell.com. Her email is ceo@drnell.com, and you can also find her on LinkedIn and connect with her there. I will include all of these links in the show notes. Don't forget to check out Acupuncture Marketing School this week while it's on sale for $200 off. I'm so excited to work with a small group of acupuncturists live. You know, I absolutely love teaching marketing, and it's going to be jam-packed with practical step-by-step instructions. And of course, you'll also get feedback from me during our 6 weeks together. I want to help you reach more patients and make an impact in your community. This work is my passion, and I invite you to join me. You don't have to do this alone. Let's do it together. And of course, if you can't attend live classes, a replay will be sent to all the enrolled students. Plus, as I mentioned earlier in this episode, there is also a self-paced version that is made up of entirely pre-recorded videos that you can do, of course, at your own pace, and you get instant access to all of the chapters. The links are in the show notes, and the discount codes to save $200 are already applied on the checkout pages. Please feel free to email me your questions at michelle@michellegressick.com. I would love to help you with your marketing. Talk to you next time.